What's up, guys? Thanks so much for stopping by the channel again today. We have another one in our Birthright faction review series here, and today we're going to take a look at Talinie, continuing on the western coast here. So we start off with Borroween, which is not available for players, but Talinie is, and it's just to the north. And again, we'll try and show the map here just as a reference, but this is a lawful good kingdom, and this is like Medoir on the southern coast. This is one that is run by the patriarch of a given church here, head of a church. So you have essentially two domains in one if you choose to run this kingdom, or theocracy, I should say. But anyway, lawful good, recommended, of course, so you can play this. So little blurb here is the hard-bidden residents of the 7 provinces of Talinie, governed by Thane, Thurian, Donalds, fill their days with work in the forest and worship of Halen. So as far as your provinces go there, none of them are overly well settled, with your best one, though, Lindholm, topping out at a 5. So that is the one that is um, sort of the most densely populated and developed, so a little bit less magic available there. You do have a couple at 3, Icehaven and Winter's Deep, and then it kind of goes on down. Freestead, Greensward, and Saramset at 2, and Seaport at only 1. So she does control most of the law in her territory here, with Borroween, though, controlling a little bit in Lindholm and Seaport, actually all of it in Seaport. As far as the temples go, nice easy situation. You are the religion of your country, so she has all of that under control. The guild situation is a little more complicated. We'll get to that in a moment. And then the sources are all under one control, though, so that does help you there. So the law, Eric Borroween and Thurian Donalds both have invested themselves with the law of Talinie. On the temple side, again, so she runs the Northern Imperial Temple of Halen, based in your nation here, and so it is, yeah, state religion, so it makes it nice and easy. Again, you get to double up on domains here. Though plenty of temples would like to move in, none of them dare try the strength of the Imperial Temple, and Donald's is supreme hierarch. So on the sources side, Torel Anveres, the mage of Talinie, works tirelessly against the machinations of the Eyeless One from the Five Peaks, and we'll cover the Five Peaks, I think, when we get to the northern marches, but it's kind of a wild, lawless territory that is nominally divided up into provinces, but is not a country in its own right. And there are a couple of major NPCs there to deal with, and there's actually a pretty hefty adventure module that takes place there too, but we'll get to that down the road. The guild situation, as I mentioned, is a little bit complicated. So you have Banier Andien of Deosone, which is not quite that far to the north, but is part of the northern marches. And Storm Holston of Stewardvik control the domain's 2 guilds, and they try to, at least on the surface, pretend to act honest. But basically, they sort of dominate the timber industries, mining, and yeah, basically those two. And again, on the surface, they try to sort of act like they're following the established laws and everything else, but basically, as it says here, right, they will stoop so low as to sabotage each other's holding. But at some point, the Thane is at least in some way aware of it, and may in some way put a stop to it there. Talinie is also one of those that has one of those supplement releases that came out, sort of player secrets to Talinie, so we'll be covering that at some point in the future as well, and kind of taking a deep dive into the nation here. On the resources side, so you have a decent amount of regency already generated, or that you generate and you accumulated already, and a pretty sizable treasury of 22 gold bars here, which isn't as large as some countries, and certainly not a lot of the major sort of powerhouse countries, NPC countries and stuff. But as far as a starting or a starting nation here that is available for you, and in many ways is a little bit fragile, and has a lot to deal with, that's actually a decent amount to start with, and we'll let you, in short order, if you focus on it, kind of solve some of your immediate issues, or at least get it under control. You do have a decent little army too. It's nothing major. It's only 6 units, but it basically is enough to sort of deal with most sort of typical threats that arise. Anyway, so it is not large, barely enough to contain the goblins and bandits of Thurazor, which is actual goblin kingdom to your north. That is one of your sort of threats. But then you do border the Five Peaks as well. And like I said, while it's not a nation in its own right, there are just any number of monsters, NPCs, and things that you can or you might have to deal with there, which depending on what your campaign is all about and what the DM decides to throw at you, that can be a constant source of issues unless you make a major push to deal with it. But that could also open up many other opportunities, and could be ripe for some settlement and conversion. So she is a bit of a crusader, but we'll cover the Thane here, Thurian Donalds, in just a second. If Borroween or one of the Rurik Jarldoms decided to invade Talinie, she could really not do too much to stop them. So that being said, Borroween is your ally. You have openly declared for him. So really, unless you do something silly to piss him off, there's really not a scenario where he should be invading you. But certainly, if for whatever reason that changed, it would not take much for him to steamroll through your country. The Rurik could be another sort of more distant external threat that you could occasionally have to deal with, especially like coastal raids or anything like that. So that would be something where you might want to sort of invest in some either like a castle or fortification or something like that, just along some of your border territories. But currently, her army has a unit of archers, 3 units of scouts, 3 of infantry, 1 scout, and a mercenary cavalry force. So, with a little bit of work and sort of raising up the levels of settlement in your or development in your territory, and just ensuring that your law, you still control that, and using maybe some of the income from your church as well. That's probably something that should be worked at near term, just to shore up some of the weaknesses of the army here. So certainly adding like a unit or 2 of archers, and then maybe some actual cavalry or knights as opposed to just the mercenary cavalry. That would cover sort of all the bases, perhaps even some pikemen, just because the Goblin Kingdom does, I believe, have quite a few like wolf cavalry in their forces, but just to sort of expand a little bit, but also shore up again some of the weaknesses that your army has, just because again it's not large by any means. So 6 units ideally. I think getting it to around 10 units is a good first step that you can afford, and then using that to deal with some of those potential external threats at some point. Some of your goals could be to potentially, again, invade into the 5 Peaks, expand your territory a little bit that way, and potentially gather enough support for maybe just eliminating the Goblin Kingdom to your north, but that would be a major undertaking, and would probably be something long term. Anyway, the Regent, if you choose to play her as she's a level 6 priest of Halen, lawful good, pretty solid bloodline as well. So yeah, she watches over the domain spiritually and temporally, and basically has kept it alive for more than 15 years now. Without her and her predecessors, the kingdom would have fallen to Borroween, or worse, goblins and brigands. So she is fanatic about her faith, as you might expect. She does tolerate other faiths, but she is a little bit more impulsive, potentially because of her youth here as well. But being as zealous as she is, she probably wouldn't hesitate to also crush other churches. And that's where it's one of her sort of weaknesses. If you again choose to play as her and maybe role play her sort of current stances or attitudes, she I wouldn't say gullible, but her zealous nature kind of gets the better of her sometimes. So she desires only to serve her God. Her people take a distant second to her relationship with Halen, and they know it. So there's another area where there could be some discontent if you can sort of work on gaining a little bit more of the support of the people in that sense, but combining it with your worship, finding a way to sort of marry those two a little bit more effectively. So head of state, but also head of church. You could do well by your people there. So the fairly excitable Donalds has found herself lured into several traps by enemies seeking her demise. These near misses have granted her a bit more caution, but she hasn't entirely learned her lesson. Her actions tend to be less than well considered, but she is learning. So, and again, that is ripe ground for your DM to throw things at you and really test her mettle or your mettle as a ruler here. So on the lieutenant side, one of her lieutenants has been manipulating her without her knowledge, and this is again one of those things that you will have to deal with at some point, and depending on how that comes about. So, though unblooded, this 7th level priest, Torius Grien, does have ambition. So, he is basically second in command of your church, and is kind of looking to advance himself, but realizes that as long as you're the head of the church, that's not going to happen for him. There's no opportunities, but he can influence both church and state and reaps the benefits of that. So he's a canny politician, and you're currently viewed as naive, and basically he makes it easy, or you make it easy essentially to be manipulated by him. So when he sees a problem, he strikes out with it with best means available. Sometimes he does a show of force, other times kind of subtle campaigns to discredit an enemy. So even though he is a priest of Halen, at least on the surface, he draws no power from that god. Instead, from LOL, the goddess of stealth. So that'd be an area where he's actively working against you and is in essentially disguise. If you ever catch any hints of that, that would be something to focus on, sort of rooting out and maybe catching him in that lie, essentially, or his duplicitous role here. So other important NPCs. The temple hierarchs ruled the villages of Talinie, guarding the law and elevating the flock. So you do have a priestess here, Siobhan Riedhie. She's only a level 3 priest, minor bloodline, but also lawful good. And she watches New Cane in Greensward. She commands a soldier station in the border town, presiding over the services of the temple, and also passes judgment in the Hall of Law. A very literal-minded priestess, obviously devoted to her god, Halen, and basically some posit that the Thane is grooming her for eventual ascension to the throne. So that would be one person who you could certainly cultivate and potentially elevate, and probably have as a trusted advisor, and potentially down the road a future lieutenant if you wanted to invest her with that ability. So a little bit of a description of the country here, and this can kind of also tie into opportunities for growth. So the forest of the Elvenwold covers the kingdom almost entirely, though most of its provinces have only sparse populations. This kingdom maintains sizable lumbering and mining industries, and they help keep the coin flowing in. But obviously there's a detriment to the land there, and the woods are slowly giving way before the expansion, which is in some ways going to be necessary for you to raise up the country. Since Donald believes the land is here for humans to use, she does not let herself worry. But again, that can bring some potential issues there. When we looked at the sort of intro to the Western Coast, right, there are many sort of schemes and machinations that Rove Manslayer is trying to bring forth, so you might have to deal with some of that for destroying the land. Anything really that can be thrown at you from the Five Peaks might be an issue there. But the goblins to the north in Thurazor probably don't really care what you're doing to the land. But again, there's many different ways that could play itself out if you get maybe too overzealous and trying to sort of destroy the natural beauties and resources of your land. And hey, there might even be shortages at some point if you kind of go whole hog on deforesting the whole province there, or not the whole province, but the whole domain. So for the most part, the people share your opinion as the monarch. You got to make a living, so the land is there for that, basically. So some miners and foresters do try to make some efforts to sort of heal some of the wounds of the land, but they are certainly in the minority. So basically the sort of prevailing view there is, right, there's plenty of wealth in the land, so it can afford to give some up. But at some point, there might be such a thing as too much, and there might be others who take a negative view of your destruction of the land there. So again, a potential issue that you may have to come to realize the hard way as the leader there. The locals, a practical and religious population, offer their stern devotion to Halen as required by law, though they may seem somewhat crude. Again, you probably get a reputation here as sort of living out in the sticks, essentially, because this is definitely sort of far off from sort of the main seats of power and established and developed kingdoms. So I'm sure that could be played up that the people in your country are sort of crude, country bumpkins, essentially. But your people are actually far from ignorant and resent any stranger who tells them otherwise. So keep that in mind too. If you were just adventuring in this country, that would be something that you might get caught out on, depending on, again, what you say to whom and how the DM decides to sort of present being in this country or domain to your party. Anyway, so these proud and independent folk rely on themselves and their god. So you can probably also experience some more zealous average citizens there too. So that'd be something to probably be careful of too, as far as making any disparaging remarks or being too vocal about a religion that isn't Halen, or if you were a worshiper of Halen but maybe from a different sect, so you would probably be well advised as just players to be a little bit tight-lipped about some of that stuff. The capital is the fortified city of Nobleton in the province of Icehaven, from which she rules. And then trade goods, as you could probably expect, hardwood lumber and coal. Roads basically connect the mining provinces of Saramset and Freestead to Lindholm, and then a sea route connects that to Storm Point in Tagus. Some trade also crosses the Black River into Borroween, so plenty of opportunity there to sort of improve some of the transportation throughout the country, but then also work on some maybe bigger and better trade routes, and maybe to get Borroween more on your side, you might try to increase trade with him there too, as he would probably appreciate the additional coin coming his way as well, which will keep his any potential military adventures on his part focused more on his archenemy Avenel, as opposed to in some way being directed at you, if that were ever to come to pass. And it might make him more pliable if you wanted to sort of recruit some of his army to maybe, again, launch an assault into the Five Peaks and start carving out territories from there. He might appreciate a different route into attacking Avenel from a different direction, for example. So, allies. So, by casting your lot with Borroween, you've basically earned yourself a powerful friend, essentially one of the top contenders for the Iron Throne. So, yeah, as it says here, you don't really need any other allies. If somebody were to mess with you, you could certainly phone a friend there, and most people probably wouldn't want to test Borroween's army. And for its support of Borroween, however, you do have the enmity of Avenel. That being said, Avenel is kind of far away and would be difficult for them to get to you in any way. So yeah, they would basically have to march through 3 separate kingdoms to reach you, and yeah, it's a threat, it's an issue, but it's not one that you're really going to have to deal with unless you start expanding closer to them, where it would be maybe viable for them to attack you that way. However, these are your main concerns here. Of greater concern, your enemies just to the east and northeast. So Thurazor, and then the Five Peaks. Basically, see you as a cheap source of raw materials. Again, that is what your nation or domain is known for. So again, that lumber and mining opportunity. And so basically, there are some frequent border crossings there, and that's something that you will probably want to put a stop to sooner or later. But again, some of that is going to need to involve building up your economy a little bit. But then also shoring up that military and potentially investing in some fortifications on those borders as well. So, and that could be an issue where if your industries are being attacked regularly and you're not putting a stop to that, or making an effort of protecting the operations there, that would be something that your enemies, public and private, will probably play up against you. So that's definitely a concern that you should probably treat seriously as the ruler here. And your advisors would hopefully be steering you towards that. But again, keep in mind of the sort of duplicitous advisor that you have as part of your church there, Tarias Green. He might be instigating some of that as well to maybe discredit you. So, and then finally, though Talinie contains plenty of industry, it also boasts plenty of magical power. Some say that the mage Torel Anvarus, who is also good aligned, has discovered a way to summon forth magic even from cultivated lands, and that is pretty special in this setting. So the more you develop provinces, the lower the magical ability or potential of those lands decreases, and eventually getting to a 0. And if it's 0, you can't really bring any magic out of it, or get any value out of it if you're a wizard for your ley lines and so on and so forth. So so that would be a good ally to sort of bring more firmly on your side, making sure that he's protecting you from magical dangers, but then also potentially trying to make use of that potential that he's discovered there, so that you can raise up the cultivation of your lands, and then let him still do his thing. So, but again, I think dealing with Thurazor first and foremost, which would essentially double the territory of your kingdom if you were ever able to take them out, opens up plenty of coastal territory for you as well, and would allow you to spread your faith, which could be a good sort of crusade for your church, and then again open up just a ton of trade opportunities, and would help make the northern marches a little bit more safe and civilized, which you could certainly play up with some of the domains in that area, and could probably charge a healthy sort of protection tax, or some sort of find some sort of way to make that work out economically in your favor as well. So that is everything for Talinie. Like I said, it's an interesting kingdom. In some ways, it is fairly fragile at the start here. And again, we haven't talked about the Northern Imperial Temple yet. We'll do that separately when we get to the end of the Western Coast section. But we'll make sure to reference Talinie again. So again, we have a whole nother domain that she runs that also brings in a good amount of coin and has resources. So you would be essentially doubling up there if you were to run this domain. So, but we've talked about several issues here. Again, the guild situation is something you want to look at. On the one hand, keeping them from getting out of control, but certainly protecting your industries and from outside influence. You want to make sure that you maintain that very important alliance with Borrowing, because again, if something were to go sour there, it really wouldn't take much from Borrowing to essentially just wipe you out. And then you have the more pressing threats of, again, Thurazor, which we'll cover, and then the Five Peaks as well. So there's all kinds of issues there. And you have the the internal issues as well, right within your own church that you're not necessarily aware of yet. So how that comes to play and how the DM chooses to bring that forth will definitely be a good test for you. So there's plenty of real hardships here, but there's also lots of great opportunity. And really, if you can get all that mastered, you can certainly become a powerhouse in the north and sort of wipe out two fairly large sort of NPC kingdoms, Thurazor and the Five Peaks. And really, if you were able to conquer most of that territory for yourself, your own personal territory would be quite significant, and would potentially provide a pathway for Borrowing to then deal with Avenil once and for all, assuming you're still allied with him, where Borrowing could probably march south at that point, and then you would come in from the north, assuming you've got the army to do it, and then sort of launch a pincer attack against Avenil. But those are very, very long-term goals, assuming you make it that way. At some point, you probably would want to also either adventure or find ways to get the Thane here leveled up a little bit. Level 6 isn't bad, but certainly to deal with some of the other nastier, larger, and more experienced threats out there, she's going to need the experience and powers as well. So, getting her up to like level 8 to 10, I think, especially compared to some of the other major forces in the setting, would probably be a good goal. So, that being said, we are running a little long here on this one. Hope you guys have enjoyed our tour through Talinie. It is one of our favorite domains to run. Let us know in the comments if you have, what your experiences have been. How's it worked in the campaign for you? What did you struggle with? Were you able to sort of build up the nation into what you wanted it to be? Let us know how all that worked. And then again, thanks so much for stopping by, guys. We hope you did enjoy. Leave us again some likes and subscribes, comments, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for stopping in.